أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله أما بعد فأعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وقد لبثت فيكم أمرا من قبله أفلا تعقلون ومن أظلم ممن افترى على الله كذبا أو كذب بآياته إنه لا يفلح المجرمون. The translation of these verses is as follows. I have indeed lived among you a whole lifetime before this. Will you not then understand? Who is then more unjust than he who forges a lie against Allah, or he who treats his signs as lies? Surely the guilty shall never prosper. Chapter 10, verses 17 through 18. Truthfulness is not only a virtue, it is also an essential prerequisite for the exalted status of prophethood. When we look at the life of Hazrat Aqdas Muhammad Mustafa sallallahu alaihi wasallam before his claim to prophethood, two very important characteristics of his conduct, namely as-sadiq and al-amin, that is, the truthful and the trustworthy, stand out prominently. In the verses of the Holy Quran just recited, Almighty Allah asks the Holy Prophet ﷺ to refer disbelievers to the period of his life he has lived among them as proof of his sincerity and the truth of his claims. Life of Hazrat Mirza Ghulam Ahmad of Qadian, the promised Messiah and the Mahdi alayhi salam, was a true image of the life of the Holy Prophet ﷺ. His self-purity and exemplary display of character before the claim to prophethood were known far and wide. Huzur repeatedly challenged the Hindus, Sikhs, and Muslims of his time if they could point out any flaws in his character or past life. However, none of them had the courage to do so. Rather, they admitted that the Prophet Messiah Islam led a life of piety and righteousness. Dear brothers and sisters, men of God have an unshakable belief in their Creator and show no sign of weakness under any circumstances. Their truthfulness becomes more conspicuous during trials and tribulations. The following historic event is a compelling evidence of the truthfulness and integrity of the Prophet ﷺ. In the year 1877, the Prophet ﷺ wrote an article comprising arguments for superiority of Islam and a rebuttal of anti-Islam allegations leveled by a Hindu sect called Arya Samaj. Huzur mailed his manuscript at the rate prescribed for the newspapers to a publishing house called Vakil Press in Amritsar. The owner of the press, Mr. Ralia Ram, was a fanatical Christian lawyer and an opponent of the Prophet ﷺ. Also included in the package was a letter addressed to the manager containing instructions about the article. According to postal regulations, it was illegal to include a letter in a package because of cheaper postal rates for the packages. It carried a fine of 500 rupees or 6 months of imprisonment. Huzur al-Islam was not aware of this regulation. On discovering the violation, Ralia Ram lost no time to prosecute the Prophet ﷺ. A lawsuit was filed, and Huzur was summoned to Gurdaspur to answer the charge. At that time, Huzur saw in a dream that Ralia Ram had sent him a venomous snake, but Huzur fried it and sent it back to him. When the case came up for trial, Huzur's attorney, Sheikh Ali Ahmed, advised him that the only way to escape punishment was to give an affidavit to the court that he had not placed the letter in the package. Huzur immediately and resolutely rejected his advice and said, "The fact of the matter is that I had myself placed this letter in the package. Therefore, I will not deny it, only to be spared the sentence." No considerations, in his view, could justify the sacrifice of truth, which ought to be sovereign in all relations of life. Thereupon, Huzur's attorney refused to defend him further, because, in his opinion, this was admission of guilt with no hope of acquittal. As a champion of truth, the Prophet ﷺ his firm response was, "Come what may, I will not tell a lie." So he appeared before the British magistrate without a liar. His armor was his honest thought, and simple truth his utmost skill. He stated the truth to the court, that the contents of the letter were not of a private nature, as there was nothing in it except that which related to the subject matter of the article, and that he had no intention to defraud the post office. Truth went straight to the magistrate's heart, and arguments and eloquence of the prosecuting liars proved of no avail. Huzur was honorably acquitted because he valued truthfulness more highly than any other quality. Now, expounding on the quality of truthfulness, the Prophet ﷺ says, "One of the natural qualities of man is truthfulness. Normally, unless a person is moved by some selfish motive, he does not wish to tell lie. He is averse to falsehood and is reluctant to have recourse to it. He is displeased with a person who is proved to have told a lie and looks down upon him. But this natural inclination cannot be accounted a moral quality. Even children and the insane exhibit it." And Huzur says, "Unless a person discards those purposes which lead him away from telling the truth, he cannot be considered truthful. If a person tells the truth where no personal interest is involved, but is ready to have recourse to falsehood where his honor or property or life is concerned, and fails to tell the truth, is no better than a child or an insane person. The proper occasion of telling the truth is when one apprehends loss of life or property or honor." Huzur's reputation for telling the truth, no matter the consequences, was so strong that often his opponents would tell the judge that they were happy to abide by Huzur's statement regarding the facts in the dispute. The following incident sheds light on this luminous quality of Huzur in his own words. Huzur says, "My son, Mirza Sultan Ahmad, filed a lawsuit against a Hindu who had built a house on our land, and the case sought it to be demolished. However, one point included in the complaint was contrary to the facts, which, if proved, could result in dismissal of the lawsuit, and as a consequence, not only Sultan Ahmad, but I too would suffer loss of property. At that time, the opposite party, finding an opportunity, nominated me as a witness. The case was in the court of a Hindu judge. Just before the hearing, Sultan Ahmad's lawyer came to me and asked how I would be testifying, as the time for the hearing was almost there. That which is true and real, I responded. To this, he said, then there is no need for you to go to the court. Let me go and withdraw the case. Hence, of my own doing, I lost the case solely for the sake of truth. And in giving precedence to truthfulness for Allah's pleasure, I considered financial loss as inconsequential." Dear brothers and sisters, from a very young age, Mirza Ghulam Ahmad of Qadian alayhi salam had no desire for exalted worldly positions. His yearnings were to be the most virtuous, upright, honest, and truthful, and for this he was ready to pay any price. In 1869, someone took him to a prominent Muslim cleric of the time, Maulvi Muhammad Hasan Batalvi, for a discussion. Mr. Batalvi belonged to the Ahl Hadith sect of Islam that faced opposition from other Muslim sects for doctrinal differences. The person who brought Huzur for the debate wanted him to refute doctrines of Ahl Hadith through a public discourse. Muhammad Hasan Batalvi opened the debate with a speech in which Huzur found nothing objectionable. When Huzur questioned Mr. Batalvi about his belief on a certain theological point, he discovered that it was in complete accord with the Islamic teachings. So Huzur refused to debate with him. Now the party that had brought Huzur for the debate was naturally upset and felt humiliated. Thus, Huzur became an object of ridicule to both parties. However, he suffered every humility and indignity with a cheerful countenance. Such was his love for truth and honesty that he did not care for anything that friends or foes might say. People generally seek popular applause, but it takes only a man of sterling character to speak the truth, even when it is unpopular. God was immensely pleased with this action of Huzur. That night, when he was alone with God, he received a revelation. तेरा खुदा तेरे इस फेल से राजी हुआ और वो तुझे बहुत बरकत देगा, यहाँ तक कि बादशाह तेरे कपड़ों से बरकत ढूंढेंगे. Your God Your God is well pleased with what you have done. He will bless you greatly, so much so that kings shall seek blessings from your garments. Another shining example of Huzur's adherence to truth was seen when 1897 Dr. Henry Martin Clark, a notable medical missionary stationed in Amritsar, India, filed a lawsuit of attempted murder against the Prophet Messiah. Hindus and non-Ahmadi Muslims helped the Christians in this heinous plot and tried their utmost to have Huzur convicted. Huzur hired services of Maulvi Fazluddin, a non-Ahmadi lawyer, to defend him. At one point, Maulvi Fazluddin suggested to submit an affidavit to the court that was not based on facts. When Huzur was asked to go over the statement, he said, "The statement is not factual. I am not willing to give any statement that contains even a shred of lie." The liar said to Huzur, "If you are not willing to give such a statement, then you are inviting trouble. You have been charged with murder. In order to get rid of this charge, you must give such a statement." Huzur said, "I will not give a statement which is contrary to facts. In order to save my neck, why should I earn God's displeasure? I do not put my trust in such false statements. I trust God Almighty. I am quite certain that He will protect me." And indeed, despite all the odds, Almighty Allah granted victory to the Prophet ﷺ in this case. The lawyer stated afterwards that he was flabbergasted at Huzur's courage, that even though his client was facing a murder charge, he was not willing to tell a lie. Hazrat Pir Sirajul Haq Sahab Raziyallahu Anhu, a companion of the Prophet Messiah, narrates, "I was once riding a horse-drawn cart from Batala to Qadian. A Hindu man was sitting next to me going to a village near Qadian. I asked him if he knew Mirza Ghulam Ahmad. He answered that he knew him very well since childhood. They were of the same age, and this man often visited Qadian. Pir Sahab asked if he could tell him anything about Mirza Sahib. The Hindu man responded by saying that Mirza Sahib has the same excellent qualities of truthfulness, trustworthiness, and piety now that he had then. And then he said, I believe that God has come down on earth disguised as Mirza Sahib. If God would not incarnate in people like him, then who else would he disguise in? This indeed is a convincing testimony of the character of the Prophet Messiah Islam from the follower of another religion who had known him for a period of almost 5 decades. Dear brothers and sisters, from his very early days, the reputation of Mirza Ghulam Ahmad of Qadian alayhi salam was about his honesty, truthfulness, and devotion to God. His father was engaged in many legal proceedings regarding family properties and wanted him to represent their cases in the courts. Despite his unwillingness, Huzur obeyed his father completely. However, he would always conduct himself with absolute honesty, truthfulness, even though it meant sometimes the displeasure of his father. One such incident occurred when hereditary tenants cut down trees upon their land. His father filed a case against the tenants for cutting down the trees. Huzur was sent to the court to present his father's views. When the magistrate asked the tenants about the matter, they replied that the magistrate should ask Mirza Sahib, meaning the Prophet Messiah salam, as they trusted him absolutely. When the magistrate inquired of the Prophet Messiah salam of the nature of the case, Huzur candidly replied that trees are like a crop. Just as we share the crops with them, so do we share the trees. The magistrate gave verdict in favor of the tenants. Huzur came back to Qadian and told his father of the account of the case. His father became so upset that he told him to leave the house. Consequently, Huzur went to Batala and stayed there for 2 months before he could return. The claim of Hazrat Mirza Ghulam Ahmad of Qadian alayhi salam as the Mahdi and the promised Messiah created a storm in the religious circles of the world with resulting fierce opposition. Huzur, however, had absolute conviction in the truthfulness and success of his mission. Let me share his majestic and awe-inspiring words, to which every new dawn and every new Ahmadi bears a witness. Huzur says, I declare with full confidence and steadfastness that I am in the right, and with the grace of Allah, victory in this field is mine. As far as I can observe with my far-reaching sight, I see the entire world covered under the steps of my truths, and it is well nigh that I shall gain a resounding victory, since another tongue is speaking in my favor, and another hand is operating to strengthen my hand. This is not being perceived by the world, but I do see it. In me speaks a heavenly spirit that instills life to each word and letter of mine. Dear brothers and sisters, I shall end my speech with an exhortation from Sayyidina Hazrat Khalifatul Masih al-Khamis, Ayatollah Aziz, calling upon us to become living examples of truthfulness. Huzur says, we Ahmadis claim to be the community of the true and the ardent devotee of the Holy Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, and we have to take the message of truth to the world. How can we go about it? First of all, we have to prove ourselves to be truthful, as the prophets of God proved their truthfulness. We too have to demonstrate our truthfulness, as it is the task of the followers of prophets of God. We are commanded to practice the blessed model of the Holy Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, and we try to do this. For this, we have to adopt the quality of truthfulness. Then alone shall we be able to fulfill the mission of the Prophet Messiah salam and successfully take the message of the Holy Prophet ﷺ to the world. May Almighty Allah enable us to live up to these expectations and become personification of this blessed model. Ameen. Allahumma salli ala Muhammadin wa ala ali Muhammadin wa ala abdika al-Masih al-Ma'ud wa barik wa sallim innaka Hamidun Majid.